welcome to the Why Marketing Podcast. On today's show, we have Andy Yost, Chief Marketing Officer over at Gannett USA Today Network. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rusty, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm good.
I appreciate you being on and taking time to explore your career journey and kind of how you got into the position that you're in now.
Absolutely. So I've been in marketing for a few years, probably close to 30, and have been in a range of businesses from financial services to media, a combination of general management and marketing. The common through line has always been a consumer marketing role, and so got into this right after going to college, and really was always intrigued by marketing from one of my first jobs, which was delivering newspapers, ironically, for Gannett. So I was a paper boy for the Elmira Star-Gazette, which was in my town. And first time, it was a great opportunity to learn about customers, the importance of listening to, what those customers had to say, understanding that, my customers wanted their newspaper on their doorstep by 6 a.m. and it didn't really matter how it got there, but it had to get there. So immersed me in customer experience and marketing at an early age, which was great.
Kind of came full circle then. I mean, it's pretty interesting that you actually start off delivering papers and now you're there. How did you ever imagine when you were doing that, that's actually where you would eventually work?
Actually, no. But, I think the thing that I've always been passionate about is communities. And, I grew up in a small town and as, I progressed in my career, and, this opportunity came forward, I was very intrigued about how I could bring my marketing skills to help grow and build the importance of local journalism in the communities we serve. So kind of a fun story that I started off that way, but, a really important role that, particularly in today's day and age of media, local journalism is the foundation to a lot of what gets percolated to the top nationally. And so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise right now surrounding media in itself and what is the job and role and how do you protect the integrity of that? Are y'all getting swarmed and how are y'all defending against a lot of that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's where brand comes into play too, right? So, with USA Today as our national brand, and we have, over 100 really important local brands as part of our network, showing the communities that we're there, we're part of those communities, we're actively listening and engaged with them, really is foundational to everything we do. So some of the things that we've done to show that our great journalism is important, but, we're actively part of the community is we've created experiences around recognizing high school athletes or have, created a events series called the Storytellers Project, where it allows for journalists and members of the community to get together and talk about issues and through first-person storytelling. And we're really trying to bond and build strong connections with those communities. And I think showing that we're part of helping making those communities stronger is where we're able to differentiate ourselves.
So when you went to school, did you always envision yourself going into journalism?
Actually, I'm a marketing major, so and so was not through the lens of journalism. But I think the common connection there really is kind of understanding the audience needs, the audience issues, and I always did feel that marketing was my passion. When I was very young, I was always intrigued by why consumers bought the laundry detergent they did or bought the cars they did, and it really comes back to brands who have unique selling propositions and how they manage those. So Tide certainly has positioned itself differently than all detergent, Audi's differently than BMW's, and thought that was fascinating. And I thought the consumer behavior around the decisions people made in that area was fascinating. So always based on that, found that could be a path that I could be interested in. And so have pursued that ever since. Media has been a great way to build, my marketing skills. I actually probably 15 years ago got into media working at a brand that probably isn't around anymore, Columbia House, but many people may remember that. And I've worked at Dow Jones, which is the Wall Street Journal, and Viacom, which is MTV and Comedy Central. But all of those brands serve their audience needs in unique and different ways, and that's been a great marketing challenge to be a part of.
I imagine over the last 30 years too, I mean, you've really seen a big transformation across really what marketing and advertising was and really to what it's become.
Right, absolutely. I think the core, though, has always been the same. I think people always want to feel connected and feel that they have a relationship with the brands that they're engaging with. And I think what has changed has been our ability, either through social media or digital marketing or experiential marketing, to really bring those experiences and connections to life in a much more meaningful way. So when I started at American Express, which was where I spent the first half of my career, performance marketing is clearly the buzzword of today. But, I was doing performance marketing back then. It was just called direct to consumer marketing. And so, in that day and age, we were sending direct mail packages to people to get them to engage with our brand. And it worked. But now it's even better because, brands can then keep that relationship alive with the social platforms that consumers are, or through the in-person experiences. So I think that it's only gotten better, but it's also gotten more challenging, right? Because those consumers now can be in an active dialogue with you, and you really do have to listen. You really have to be engaged. And so, customer experience is a top priority for us at the USA Today Network, and we've invested a lot to make sure that we're listening to the issues that matter most, because consumers will tell you today in no unending terms, what they need and what they want. But I think a lot is the same. It's just evolved in a positive way.
You just got to be able to be ready to pivot whenever you get those signs and those tells from what you're seeing out there from the trends.
Exactly.
So what made you decide to go over to Gannett, which is part of USA Today?
Yep, absolutely. So I had been at Viacom in the prior job, and was working on great brands there, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central. But I think was drawn to Gannett and the USA Today Network really because of the community aspect to it, as I'd mentioned. And so really an opportunity to show consumers that we're not just the newspaper that showed up on your driveway, that we were really a relationship that had more to it than just that. And so was able to start to change our communication strategy. We invested in much clearer articulation of what our brand position should be, so that our news colleagues, our product colleagues, and our marketing colleagues could all work towards the same goals to bring that brand position to life. And really doing some things that perhaps a business that for many years had operated more as a manufacturing and distribution business now could operate more as a modern digital marketing business going forward. And we've had some very good success there. We've also learned a lot along the way. And I think for us, the thing that really has come forward as being a great way to not only engage employees but keep us focused is defining what our purpose is for consumers, and then making sure we're bringing that to life. So our purpose at Gannett is to help communities connect, act, and thrive. And in doing so, we're building programs, products, journalism around through that lens, and using that as a kind of a North Star for us.
I grew up in Houston, and if I look back, there's Houston Chronicle, Houston Post. I'm not even sure either are still around. Maybe the Chronicle is. I know the Post is long gone. Here in Austin, we had the American Statesman, which is pretty much, there's no more real physical paper. It's all digital.
Right.
Yes. How did USA Today evolve and avoid that same fate?
Sure. So I think, we're fortunate because, USA Today is connected to this broader network of local media properties. And together we've created this USA Today network. I believe that, one of the things that differentiates us is our ability to be on the ground in all of these different places across the country, which helps us surface the various issues around the economy or politics or education that matters. So it's really strengthened us and positioned us well. We won 3 Pulitzer Prizes last year for our reporting, which was really not just USA Today, but influenced very much by our local markets as well. And so I think we have been fortunate to build a connected network that really is working well, but also is connecting, like I said earlier, to consumers in different ways too. So it's, it can't just be about the printed word. It has to be how we show up in everything we do. So the connection to a purpose, the activations that can be digital, can be in print, but can be in person and can be really grounded in communities, I think makes a difference. It's not to say it's not challenging though, right? Because, consumers have lots of different choices in terms of where they get their information from. But I think that, as we've seen over the past couple of years, it's not always clear that those sources are the right credible sources either. So we keep that in mind, and we certainly help our customers understand that too. So but it really takes, from a management standpoint and employee standpoint too, a very unified approach in terms of how we work together. I think if you were to ask any of our teams across the company, we do work lockstep in terms of everything we do, which makes a difference.
So if there's another CMO out there with really a legacy brand, and they're looking at the shift happening underneath them, what advice would you give them to help them transform and to pivot to be able to weather through that? I mean, because clearly y'all have done an exceptional job there at USA Today.
I think one, you have to, make sure that your colleagues are aligned with the need to drive change. And that may not be the case, right? You may have some folks who feel that the path you're on is the right one. So, understanding first and foremost, do you have general consensus, in your organization about the need to transform is key. Two, once you have that, and I think, if you're going through transformation, you can all agree on that. Two, I think, as a business, you have to get comfortable taking risks. Some things are going to work and many things will not work. And being open and honest in those dialogues to say, we took a bet here and it was a calculated risk, but it didn't work. And we're going to stop doing it, but we're not calling it a failure. We're calling it a learning, because, what we learn from it is the following, and that's how we're going to, strengthen our approach next time. I think that's the only way you can operate if you're looking to transform a business. If you're looking for everything to work, that's not going to be the case. I think three, over communication is key. And, what is it? They say you have to tell people something 5 times before it sinks in. But, you
definitely
have
with kids.
Right, exactly. But, sometimes that's with adults too. And, I think the more that you reinforce why your strategy is the strategy we need to pursue, and what the role that everyone is contributing to that strategy is, I think that helps a lot too.
Now, is that both external with the consumer being over communicating with them as well, or are you talking about purely internally?
I think internally, but I think, for us externally to our consumers, if we've been talking to them in one way for years and they're unaware of all the other things we're doing, that's a value story, a brand message that you have to continue to reinforce differently. So, for example, in our business, a lot of the way that we've driven subscriptions over the years have been through great deals. Sign up for your local media brand for $3 a month and get a great access to great content. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time doing is, really building out the benefits and features of that experience, so that price certainly is important, but, you come to us because, we have the best sports reporter in the area for high school sports. We have the expert journalist who's going to help you understand all the things to do in your community. You're going to get the insight on education and local government through us. And by the way, you can celebrate with us at one of our events in your local market and come together with others in the community that you're part of. And by really honing the message in terms of what those benefits and services are, really, we think is, a great way to start to, show consumers that we're different. And one of the things I'm excited about is, in a media organization, we operate, what we call as church and state, right? The business side doesn't influence the journalism, but at the same time, we do have to work together. And so I'm excited because a lot of our editors have put on the hat of marketers to, start to tell their readers about why it is so important to support local journalism, why it is so important to participate in the experiences that we're curating. And they're doing an excellent job telling the story of why our brands are so meaningful in those communities. Don't get caught up in rule-bound ways of, we can't do that, and become creative about, how you engage your colleagues in terms of helping the greater cause, which is engaging audience and growing your business. And we've found that has been successful in many of our markets.
I started reading the USA Today because I used to travel a tremendous amount. So I'd come home sometimes with 3 or 4 newspapers because I'd get one at my door at the hotel. I'd get one at the Admiral's Club. I'd get one on another plane. It was just like I constantly just got all these papers because I could read about everything. It wasn't just localized. It was also national. Those partnerships, that's a pretty valuable opportunity to be able to really distribute content to all those different touches. Now, of course, now everybody is accessing. I access it through this little device, but I still get the newspaper when I go to hotels. Now they ask me if I want it.
You say yes.
Dropping it. Because there's just something nice about sitting down and flipping through a newspaper, especially when you can take a break, and travel gives you a good opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of the print reading experience, there's the thing that's called serendipity, right? That, you might not have been looking for a certain article, but you came across it and you learned something and you engaged in a different way, which, I keep challenging, our digital product organization to let's define what digital serendipity can be for the reader. And I'm not quite sure we're there yet as an industry or as digital players, but I think that is something that print has always delivered and done a great job on.
If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you do?
Aside from golfing with my daughters and wife, no. I love business challenges. I love consumer marketing. I think for me, I'd cited earlier, Columbia House was another place I'd worked. That was a business model that was going through a lot of challenges with how consumers were purchasing music and movies. And we did a lot of work there, once again, to focus on what the value proposition of that product was versus going to retail and why it mattered. I think those puzzles are fascinating. And so I'm open to how can I help brands that are going through that transition successfully find new ways to show up in meaningful ways. I think for me, the sweet spot of working across multiple industries, having experienced brands that have worked well, like American Express, to some that have worked less well. And I think hopefully, continue to find challenges like that in my career going forward. I read a book a couple months ago by Beth Comstock, who was most recently the vice chairman of General Electric, and it's called Imagine It Forward. And, I think she saw clearly GE and NBC going through, a range of transition and transformation moments in her career. But what she really did a nice job of articulating is that there's something exciting about being part of solving hard problems and uncovering what the potential of your brand for the future is. I think it's a great book. I would encourage people to read it. But she also, isn't shy in terms of talking about it. It's hard, right? So she basically talks about the gatekeepers, right? So the gatekeepers are those folks in an organization that are, really looking to hold on to power, and, they're going to not want to line up against, new ways of thinking. They find it threatening and they won't support it necessarily. So how do you recognize that? How do you work with partners like that in your business and creatively engage them in a way that makes them feel that they can be part of that change, part of the, better way forward? And so I love those types of challenges, and, found that, in my current role where folks have been doing fantastic work for years, but, maybe they're unaware of other approaches to consider. And so maybe initially are resistant. And I think, one of my jobs is to help them understand why these are opportunities to explore, uncover, pursue. And like I said earlier, many times they don't work, but many times they do. And it's important for us to take those risks if we're going to have success in growing the business going forward.
Looking forward at your business, what is next for Gannett and USA Today and those businesses?
So certainly I'm bullish on local journalism for the future, and I think that that's a commitment we're lined up against. I think that USA Today as a brand has lots of possibilities in terms of not only journalism, but bringing the nation together around issues and topics in meaningful ways. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that, engagement with our audience, and that's important. I will say that, USA Today as a brand was, probably one of the early innovators in this space. So, 35 plus years ago in print, who would have thought of a newspaper in color with, ways of distilling content down into small, meaningful, yet impactful ways to, understand issues. So to your point of getting it at your hotel, you like the 50 states coverage. I always viewed that as Twitter before Twitter, right? It was short, digestible sound bites of information. So I think with our brand, we have a lot of permission for innovation, and that's something we're going to continue to drive hard on going forward. And I see great things coming from that.
Last question for you, based around reflection. You've obviously had 30 years experience doing what you're doing. Is there anything that if you look back at your career, that one piece of advice that you would give, what would that be?
I have a lot of advice. I will say, to the point of failure that I've mentioned a few times, get comfortable with failure and don't take it personally. I think for many years, failure wasn't something I was comfortable with. And I'm not suggesting that you proactively seek out failure, but I think you have to proactively seek out opportunities that have some level of risk associated with them. In doing so, it may not work, and it's okay to recognize that. I worked on a project within the past 2 years where we made an investment. It was fairly sizable. I thought it was a great potential win. It didn't turn out to be that way, and I got to report back that there was more money spent on this than I would have liked to see. But I learned a lot from that, and that allowed us to move that piece of the business forward in a different way. So that was not something I would have been comfortable with 30 years ago and maybe even 10 years ago. So that's important. Another piece of advice, and I try to share this a lot with folks who are early on in their career, because I was given this advice early on by a boss. Always speak up and share your perspective. Don't wait to be invited to be a part of a conversation. If you have ideas, share them. It only makes the idea overall a stronger one. And, I still see too many employees feel like, oh, the boss said X, so that's what we're doing. My expectation is, we all need to share ideas and thoughts to come up with the best solution possible. An easy thing for anyone at any stage of their career is to really participate in the dialogue. And if you're not invited, but you feel you've got a great idea, invite yourself into that conversation through an email, through a hallway conversation, but make sure that your ideas are heard, because any company needs the best ideas from the brightest people possible.
I agree. Good dialogue can just create an explosion of great ideas, because
Absolutely.
Somebody hears something, all of a sudden it triggers another thought that makes it all come full circle. And you may just completely change a different direction. That ultimately becomes a huge success.
Yep, totally agree. And, and I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine yesterday who was remarking how one of his direct reports has been persistent on, an issue for months, and he wasn't seeing it until one day he did, and he appreciated the persistence on driving home that issue, and it paid off, because now that program he's working on will be much better. But it's speaking up, it's listening, it's being actively engaged in those conversations. It's key.
Did you say something earlier about 5-6 times it takes the average person to
right?
Yes. So that was a perfect example of that value, and just continuing and staying after it.
Absolutely.
Being persistent.
Yep. So
it's a contact sport.
It is a contact sport, right?
That's
absolutely
awesome.
Is.
Man, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking time. I know you're traveling, and hopefully maybe we can have you back on down the road.
That'd be great. This is fun. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
You do the same.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.